My name is Amelia, and I never imagined that the person I trusted most would one day strip me down with words sharper than knives. Let me take you into the exact moment my world cracked open, because this is not just a story about betrayal, it is about reclaiming freedom when someone tries to bury you alive. It began on a rainy Thursday evening. I was buried under legal documents in my downtown office, the hum of the desk lamp filling the silence. My phone buzzed. It was my husband, Xander. His voice came through with no emotion, cold and detached. Amelia, I'm done with you. I've already spoken to my lawyer. You will hear from him soon. At first I thought it was a cruel joke, maybe one of his tantrums when business stress got the better of him. But then he continued, his tone cutting. You're not enough. You never were. I don't want to waste another second pretending. My heart stopped. The man I had stood by for over a decade, the man whose late-night business trips I excused, the man I defended to friends and family, was now saying I was worthless. I tried to breathe. My mind raced through the years of sacrifices, the countless nights I stayed awake to finish casework, while still making sure there was food on the table when he came home. I thought of the promises he made on our wedding day, that no matter what, we were a team. All of it shattered with one phone call. The worst part was not the divorce itself. It was the brutal way he reduced me to nothing more than a failure in his eyes. A lawyer, yes, but not glamorous. Successful, but not rich enough for his taste. A woman who had stood tall in courtrooms, but was suddenly deemed not beautiful enough to stand beside him in life. I dropped my phone onto the desk. The words echoed in my head louder than the thunder outside. You're not enough. You never were. The betrayal felt physical, like someone had yanked the floor from under me. I sat in my office chair, tears welling up, unable to comprehend how fast everything was unraveling. But beneath the pain, there was something else, an ember of rage. I did not know it yet, but this ember would ignite into a fire strong enough to turn my husband's arrogance into ashes. I had no idea that one decision, one phone call, would lead to the unraveling of his empire and the rebuilding of my life on my terms. This is the story of how I stopped being the silent partner in my own marriage and became the architect of my own freedom. So, that was only the beginning, and if you think it cannot get colder than a husband telling his wife she is nothing, wait until you hear what came next. Xander always believed that money was the ultimate proof of worth. He ran his company with an iron grip and reminded me constantly that he was the real success in our marriage. I remember one dinner party with his colleagues. I had just finished winning a case that protected a small business from being crushed by a corporate giant. My client hugged me with tears in her eyes. That victory meant the world to me. Yet when I proudly shared the story at dinner, Xander cut me off with a laugh. She fights small cases. It's cute, he said, swirling his wine. The table chuckled awkwardly, unsure how to react. My cheeks burned, but I smiled to hide the sting. That was always the dynamic. No matter how much I achieved, he belittled it because the checks I brought home were smaller than his. To him, my career was a hobby. To me, it was a calling. It wasn't just about the money, it was about power. Xander believed beauty and wealth determined someone's worth. He compared me to other women models, influencers, the glamorous wives of his business partners. You should try dressing like them, he would mutter when I got ready for events. You look too serious. Those words chipped away at me little by little. For years I told myself this was just how he expressed stress, that deep down he valued me. But I began to notice the distance growing. He came home later, and later, sometimes smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine. He claimed business trips were urgent, often leaving without warning. I buried my doubts under case files, convincing myself that love required patience. The night he officially declared the divorce, everything became clear. His contempt for me had been simmering for years. He was simply waiting for the right moment to discard me. What he never realized, though, was that I was far stronger than the picture he painted of me. I replayed his words in my mind over and over. You're not enough. You never were. It was as if he wanted to erase every sacrifice I had made, every trial I fought alone while keeping our household together. But instead of breaking me, his arrogance began to fuel something inside me. If he thought my worth could be measured by the size of my paycheck or the shape of my body, then he had forgotten who I truly was. And here's the thing, his obsession with money and image blinded him to the truth. In court, in negotiations, power isn't always about who has the most. It's about who knows how to fight, how to use the law as a shield and a sword. That was my world. He had no idea the storm he had just invited into his life. I stared at the signed divorce papers delivered through his friend later that night. My hands shook as I held them, but not from fear. It was fury mixed with clarity. Xander believed he was untouchable. He thought he could walk away with everything, his business, his mistress, his pride, and leave me broken. He was wrong. Because here's the secret, he never cared to remember years ago when we first got married, he was the one who insisted on a prenup. And inside that prenup was a clause he now desperately hoped I had forgotten. But I hadn't. And before I reveal what that clause was, let me pause and ask you something. If you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or told you're not enough, hit that subscribe button and share this story. We need more voices reminding the world that no one gets to decide our worth but us. Where are you watching from? Leave it in the comments, I'd love to know. Because this is not just my story. It's a story about every person who has ever been told they don't measure up only to rise higher than anyone expected. And my rise was just about to begin. Doubts always start quietly, like shadows creeping into a room at dusk. At first, I ignored them. Xander was my husband, my partner, and despite his harsh words, I wanted to believe he was faithful. But his actions spoke louder than his promises. It began with the late nights. He claimed his business was expanding, requiring endless meetings with investors. I would stay up waiting for him, the clock ticking past midnight, only to hear his key turn in the door hours later. Sometimes he didn't come home at all. I would find a vague text on my phone the next morning, stayed at the office. Then came the trips. He traveled more frequently each time to a new city. I asked questions, but his answers were rehearsed as if he had practiced them in the mirror. Deals to close, clients to charm, you wouldn't understand. His suitcase always smelled of perfume, subtle but unmistakable, not mine. One evening I noticed something different. He had bought a new cologne stronger than the one I gave him last Christmas. A gift from a business partner, he shrugged, dismissing my curiosity. But deep inside, my instincts whispered that this was no business gift. It was a token from someone who wanted to leave her scent on him. I brushed those thoughts aside. Love makes fools of us all, and I was no exception. I convinced myself that I was paranoid, that maybe the long hours and missed dinners were normal for a man running a large company. After all, hadn't I sacrificed enough late nights for my own work? Perhaps this was just what ambition looked like. Still, cracks widened. He stopped holding my hand in public. He refused to attend events with me, claiming he was too busy. On the rare occasions he did appear, he seemed distracted, his eyes scanning the room for something or someone else. When I tried to reach for him, he pulled away, as though even my touch was a burden. The worst came when he began criticizing me openly, my clothes, my hair, my body. "You're too plain," he sneered once while I was getting ready for court. "No wonder people don't notice you." I bit back the tears, applying lipstick with shaking hands. For a man who was supposed to cherish me, he seemed determined to tear me down piece by piece. That night, I sat alone in our bedroom, staring at the ceiling. A lawyer's mind is trained to see patterns, to analyze evidence. And the evidence was everywhere. He wasn't just pulling away, he was hiding something. My gut told me the truth. I didn't want to face Xander, was not only unhappy, he was already gone. One moment haunts me still. I called his phone late at night after he missed another dinner. A woman's laugh echoed faintly before the line cut off. He later claimed it was the television in the background, but I knew. Deep down, I knew. It was in that moment that suspicion transformed into certainty. I had given him the benefit of the doubt for too long. It was time to stop being blind. So I made a decision. If Xander thought he could betray me in the dark, I would bring everything into the light. No more excuses, No more waiting. I was ready to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it would be. Ike, but before I take you to the moment I found undeniable proof, I want to ask, have you ever ignored your instincts because you didn't want to face the truth? Share your story in the comments. Sometimes the hardest part isn't discovering betrayal, it's admitting that you already knew. Because soon I would no longer be able to deny it. The evidence was closer than I imagined. The night I found proof of Xander's betrayal, I wasn't looking for it. I wasn't snooping or digging through his things with suspicion. I was simply cleaning. His old laptop had been left in the corner of our study gathering dust. He had bought himself a sleek new one months ago and abandoned this one like yesterday's news. I thought maybe I could repurpose it for my own files. When I opened it, the familiar login screen lit up. His password was the same as always. He wasn't clever about those things. My intention was innocent at first, but within minutes, a single icon caught my eye, a Facebook account that didn't belong to the man I knew. The profile picture was vague, an abstract image of a city skyline. The name was slightly altered from his own, just enough to slip past casual searches. My stomach knotted as I clicked, and there it was. Dozens of photos, messages, and posts. He hadn't just been living a double life, he had been celebrating it. Pictures of him with a young woman, her flawless hair catching the sunlight, her lips pressed against his cheek. Captions filled with inside jokes, vacations, and words like my love and forever. I scrolled through with trembling fingers. Each click was another stab to the chest, their smiles, their dinners, their weekends at resorts he had never taken me to. He had called me too busy, too plain, too serious, yet here he was showering another woman with the very attention he had denied me for years. One message seared itself into my memory. You're the only one who makes me feel alive. She doesn't compare to you. She's boring, a burden. She, that was me, his wife. The woman who had stayed beside him during sleepless nights and stood in courtrooms fighting battles he could never understand, reduced to a burden in a message to his mistress. The tears came hot and fast, blurring the screen. I slammed the laptop shut, my breath ragged. Rage mixed with heartbreak in my chest, a storm I could barely contain. How could he parade this affair so boldly, as if I was too blind or too insignificant to ever find it? That night I waited for him. When he walked through the door, the smell of her perfume clung to him like smoke. I didn't hesitate. Xander, I said, my voice shaking but loud. Are you cheating on me? He froze. For 1 second I hoped for denial, maybe even shame. Instead, he smirked. I opened the laptop and turned it toward him, the photos glowing like open wounds. I have proof, I declared. He didn't flinch. Amelia, you're just not that interesting anymore. You bury yourself in cases and neglect me. Besides, you're not a supermodel. You don't captivate me. The words sliced through me. All the air left my lungs. I wanted him to deny it, to at least pretend. Instead, he mocked me. What are you talking about? I shot back, my voice breaking. I've been here every step of the way. You're the one who stopped coming home. You're the one who refuses to communicate. Don't twist this on me. But he leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his expression cold. Good. Now that you know, I don't have to hide it anymore. She and I will have a perfect life together after I divorce you. Finally, I'll marry someone worthy of me. His words hit harder than the betrayal itself. Not only did he cheat, but he took pride in it. He wanted me to feel small, discarded, replaceable. And for the first time in our marriage, I realized I wasn't standing across from a partner. I was standing across from an enemy. I crumpled into the chair, sobbing as he walked past me without a second glance. Years of loyalty, sacrifice, and love dismissed in seconds. But even in that moment of devastation, something hardened inside me. He thought he had destroyed me. He thought I would crumble and walk away with nothing. But he had underestimated me. And he was about to learn the cost of scorning a woman who knows exactly how to fight back. That discovery was the breaking point. Yet it was also the turning point. And while he believed he had stripped me of everything, he had actually given me the weapon I needed most, the truth. The confrontation that followed felt less like a conversation and more like a trial. Only, this time, I was the one being judged. I still remember the heaviness in the air that night. The silence in our living room broken only by the ticking of the clock on the mantel. I had confronted him with proof of his affair, thinking deep down that maybe, just maybe, he would at least show a flicker of guilt. Instead, he looked me in the eyes and delivered words I will never forget. "Amelia, you're just not good enough for me anymore," he said flatly, as though reading a business report. "You're dull, you're average, you'll never be the kind of woman who turns heads. I need someone who reflects my status, someone beautiful enough to stand next to me." For a moment the world tilted, my knees weakened. My husband, the man I had loved for over a decade, wasn't just betraying me, he was discarding me like a worn-out suit. His tone was cold, arrogant, and final. I tried to speak my voice, trembling but defiant. "After all these years, after everything we've been through, how can you throw this in my face? I stood by you when no one else did. I built you up when you doubted yourself, and this is how you repay me." His response was a dagger. "You've always been beneath me, Amelia. I am a proud business owner now, and you, well, you're just a lawyer with an inflated sense of self. You don't bring anything valuable to this marriage anymore." My chest tightened as tears welled up. I wanted to scream to remind him of the nights I carried him, when his company almost went under, of the sacrifices I made, when I could have pursued far more lucrative offers. But he wasn't listening. He had already chosen his narrative, and in it, I was the failure. He leaned back on the couch, smirking. "I've already decided. I'm divorcing you. I don't want to see your face in this house again. I've hired a lawyer, one of the best. You'll be hearing from him soon." The cruelty of his words was matched only by his indifference. He didn't shout, he didn't rage, he simply dismissed me like a subordinate in a meeting. Then, as if twisting the knife deeper, he added, "It's time I marry someone worthy of my name. She will make a far better wife than you ever could." That was the moment I broke. My tears streamed freely, each one fueled by disbelief and humiliation. I had loved this man through thick and thin, and here he was boasting about another woman, as though I had been nothing more than a placeholder in his life. But even as I cried, another part of me, the lawyer, the fighter, took note. His arrogance was his weakness. His certainty that I would slink away quietly was his blind spot. When his friend arrived later that evening to deliver the divorce papers, he couldn't even face me himself. The friend looked at me with sympathy, almost apologetic, as though he too could see the cruelty in Xander's actions. I accepted the papers with trembling hands, shut the door, and collapsed to the floor. The weight of wasted years pressed down on me. Yet amid the devastation, something stirred. I whispered to myself through tears, "This will not destroy me. He thinks I am powerless, but he has no idea who he is dealing with." Because the truth was simple, Xander might have had the money, the arrogance, and the mistress. But I had something far more dangerous. I had the law, and I had the will to fight. That night, staring at the papers, I felt a transformation. The woman he tried to shatter was gone. In her place stood someone who would not only survive, but rise. And soon Xander would realize that his greatest mistake wasn't cheating on me. His greatest mistake was underestimating me. I sat on the floor of my childhood bedroom, the divorce papers spread across my lap like a death sentence. My tears had dried into salty streaks on my face, but my heart still pounded with the rhythm of betrayal. For hours, I stared at the ink, the signature, the brutal dismissal of everything I had once believed about marriage. But as the numbness gave way to clarity, I remembered something Xander surely hoped I had forgotten. The prenup. It had been years since we signed it back, when we were just two ambitious people in love, dreaming of a future together. Ironically, it was Xander who insisted on it. He wanted protection for his business, certain that his star was destined to rise higher than mine. He was already wealthy but paranoid. He said it was just in case. I remember laughing about it at the time, teasing him that he was being overly cautious. But I agreed not because I thought it was necessary, but because love made me generous. We sat across from each other at a mahogany table, his lawyer drafting clause after clause. And then one detail slipped in, a clause that seemed almost trivial back then. If either of us committed infidelity, the faithful partner would be entitled to half of the other's business assets. I had signed without hesitation. After all, I trusted him. Now, staring at those divorce papers, the memory hit me like lightning. He had cheated. I had proof. And by the very contract he insisted on, half of his empire was mine. Suddenly everything made sense. Why he had called so coldly. Why he sent the papers through a friend rather than face me. Why he had bragged about hiring the best lawyer. He wasn't just divorcing me, he was preparing to drag this out, hoping that heartbreak would blind me into surrender. He wanted me to walk away quietly, abandoning what was rightfully mine. But he underestimated me, again. I wiped my face and rose to my feet, a new fire coursing through me. If Xander thought he could discard me and still keep everything he had built, often on my silent sacrifices, he was mistaken. He would learn that I was not a woman to be silenced, and I was not afraid of a fight. I picked up my phone and called his lawyer's office. My voice was steady, professional, almost detached as I requested an appointment. The receptionist's surprise was evident, but I didn't care. I knew exactly what I was doing. Within 48 hours, I had secured a meeting. Then I packed my belongings. I refused to stay another night in a house where I had been demeaned and replaced. I moved back into my childhood home, a place that carried memories of innocence, but now symbolized resilience. When I texted Xander to inform him, I didn't beg or plead. I wrote, "I've already moved my things. Consider it a gift you no longer have to look at my ugly face as you once called it." His reply came quickly, arrogant as ever. "Good. Finally, you're being sensible. My lawyer will handle everything." I almost laughed. He still had no idea what was coming. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm. The rage and despair were still there, but they had sharpened into resolve. I wasn't just a betrayed wife anymore. I was a lawyer with every legal weapon I needed. And most importantly, I had truth on my side. I whispered to myself that night, staring at the ceiling of my childhood room. This is not the end. This is where I take back control. What? Xander believed the prenup would shield him. He thought wealth and status would protect him. But that very contract, the one he used to flex his power, would become the chain that dragged him down. And soon he would realize he had signed his empire away the moment he betrayed me. 2 days later, I walked into the cafe where I was scheduled to meet Xander's lawyer. The place was buzzing with chatter, the smell of roasted coffee beans thick in the air, but all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. I had dressed deliberately professional, sharp, confident. If Xander's plan was to intimidate me with a top lawyer, then I would meet that challenge head-on. When I entered, a man in his mid-40s stood up awkwardly from a corner table. He was tall, his tie slightly crooked, his hands shaking as he adjusted his glasses. This was Jake, the lawyer Xander had boasted about. For a moment he tried to compose himself, extending his hand. But I could see at the flicker of recognition. He knew exactly who I was. Ms., he stammered, clearly unsettled. I smiled, calm but firm. "It's Amelia. And yes, I am the wife your client is so eager to discard. Let's sit." The moment we settled into our chairs, I saw the unease deepen in his eyes. He had expected a broken woman, someone desperate or afraid. Instead, he was staring at a fellow lawyer, someone who had built her career on dissecting lies and exposing truths. "I suppose you know why we're here," Jake began, fumbling with his notepad. "My client has made it clear he wants a swift divorce. He's concerned you might try to drag out the proceedings unnecessarily." I leaned forward, my voice low and steady. "Is that what he told you? That I'm the one trying to delay funny because the truth is quite the opposite. He's the one planning to prolong this, hoping I'll surrender. Did he mention why?" Jake blinked rapidly. "Well, he did warn me you might make accusations." "Accusations," I cut in, "or facts. Tell me, did he mention the mistress, the countless photos and messages I found on his hidden account?" The lawyer froze. His silence spoke louder than words. I could see the sweat forming at his temple. "No," I pressed. "Then let me enlighten you. Your client has been cheating on me for months. I have proof, screenshots, photos, messages, but that's not even the part that matters most. Do you know what else he conveniently forgot to tell you?" Jake swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" "The prenup," I said, pulling a thick envelope from my bag and sliding it across the table. "The contract your client himself insisted on when we got married. The very contract that guarantees me half of his business if he ever strayed. And guess what? He did. Jake's face went pale. His hands trembled as he opened the envelope and flipped through the documents. Clause after clause confirmed what I said. His jaw tightened when he saw the evidence attached, printed messages, photos of Xander and his mistress, timestamps, everything airtight. This changes things, he muttered, clearly shaken. I allowed myself a small smile. Yes, it does. And before you think this is just a scare tactic, know this, I came prepared for court. But I'd prefer efficiency. I don't need to ruin your reputation along with his. All I want is what I'm entitled to. For a long moment, Jake stared at me clearly, reevaluating everything he thought he knew. Then, almost reluctantly, he admitted I had no idea. He never told me about this prenup. He never told me about the affair either. Of course he didn't, I replied, my tone sharper now. Because Xander has always underestimated me. He thought I'd crumble. He thought you'd walk into this blind and take his side without question. But here's the truth, Jake. You're smart enough to know when you're holding a losing case. He nodded slowly, defeat settling across his features. I think I need to have a serious conversation with my client. To be honest, I'm not sure I'll continue representing him after this. I leaned back, gathering my files with practiced precision. That's probably wise. Because no matter who he hires next, the evidence doesn't change, and the law will always stand with me. As I left the cafe, I felt a surge of power. For the first time since Xander's betrayal, I wasn't the one on the defensive. I had turned the tables. He thought his money and arrogance would shield him, but instead he had armed me with the very tools I needed to dismantle his empire. Walking back into the crisp afternoon air, I allowed myself a small laugh. He thought he had hired the best lawyer in town, but he forgot one crucial detail: his wife was a lawyer too, and she was the one he should have feared all along. The call came the very next day. My phone buzzed, just as I was preparing notes for another case. I glanced at the screen, and my breath caught Xander. After the last confrontation, I had expected silence. We had agreed to speak only through lawyers. But arrogance rarely follows rules, and Xander was no exception. I answered, my tone calm. Yes. His voice exploded through the speaker. What the hell did you say to Jake? Do you realize what you've done? I almost laughed at the desperation that dripped from his words. Oh, so now you want to talk to me directly? Yesterday I was invisible. Today I'm suddenly worth a phone call. Stop playing games, Amelia, he barked. My lawyer quit. He walked out on me after meeting you. What did you tell him? What lies did you spin? I let his fury hang in the air before replying, cool and sharp. No lies, Xander. Only the truth. I showed him what you were too cowardly to admit: the affair, the messages, the prenup you signed with your own hand. You think lawyers will risk their reputation defending a client who hides evidence? You made a fool out of him, not me. There was a pause followed by a frustrated groan. You're nothing, Amelia. A nobody. I won't let you steal my company. I'll hire another lawyer, someone better. You'll see. The venom in his words no longer pierced me. Instead, they fueled me. Good luck with that. But here's a piece of advice this time. Be honest with whoever you hire. Tell them about your mistress. Tell them about the prenup. Otherwise, you'll keep watching lawyers walk out on you. The line went silent. Then with a furious hiss, he hung up. I set the phone down, exhaling slowly. For the first time in years, I wasn't shaken by his insults. His words, you're nothing, echoed, but they no longer had power. Because deep down, I knew the truth. He was the one unraveling, not me. That week I heard whispers through colleagues. Xander was scrambling, bouncing from one attorney to another, each meeting ending in rejection. His arrogance had blinded him. He thought money could buy loyalty, but seasoned lawyers recognized disaster when they saw it. Representing him would mean walking into court with no defense, only humiliation. Meanwhile, I prepared. I organized every piece of evidence: screenshots, photographs, financial records. Each document was a weapon sharpened and ready. The more I worked, the more my grief transformed into purpose. Rage no longer consumed me, it drove me. Then one evening my phone buzzed again. This time I answered with curiosity. His voice was different, strained thinner than before. Amelia, this is getting out of hand. We can settle this without dragging my name through the mud. Stop sabotaging me. I laughed a sound that startled even me. Sabotaging you, Xander. You're sabotaging yourself. You cheated, you lied, you forgot your own prenup. I didn't build this mess, you did. His breathing grew heavy. You won't win. I'll destroy you in court. You'll come begging for mercy. But I could hear it, the crack in his voice, the tremor of fear. He knew he was running out of options. I replied softly, begging. That's not my role in this story, but it might be yours. Another furious click ended the call. I sat back, a slow smile spreading across my face. For years, Xander had controlled the narrative. He made me feel small, insignificant, replaceable. But now the script had flipped. He was the one desperate flailing, watching his carefully curated empire slip through his fingers. I closed my laptop that night, a strange calm settling over me. He thought he had me cornered, but the truth was he had already lost. And soon he would realize that the wife he tried to break was the woman who would dismantle him piece by piece. It didn't take long for the next storm to arrive. A week later, as I was leaving my office, my phone lit up with Xander's name again. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to ignore him, but another part wanted to hear just how desperate he had become. I answered, keeping my voice neutral. Amelia, he began, his tone sharp but unsteady. This has gone far enough. Every lawyer I've approached refuses to take my case. And I know why. You've been sabotaging me. You've been spreading lies about me to poison my chances. I stopped in my tracks, standing on the courthouse steps, my briefcase heavy in my hand. The audacity of his words almost made me laugh. Sabotaging you, I repeated slowly, letting the silence sting before continuing. Xander, you don't need me to ruin your reputation. You're doing a fine job of that on your own. His voice rose. Don't play games with me. They told me you scared them off. You're manipulating the system because you know you can't beat me fairly. The anger in his accusations no longer hurt. It only revealed his weakness. I took a deep breath and replied firmly. Listen carefully, Xander. Lawyers aren't walking away because of me. They're walking away because of you. You lied to them. You hid the affair. You hid the prenup. No attorney wants to stand in court blindsided with their credibility destroyed. You made them look like fools before the fight even began. There was a pause on the other end. I could hear him breathing rapid and shallow. For the first time, he didn't have an immediate retort. That silence told me more than words ever could. He knew I was right. I pressed on my voice, steady and cold. The truth is simple. You are unreliable. You are dishonest. And no one with any sense is willing to risk their career on a client like you. This isn't sabotage, Xander. This is justice. This is consequences. His tone shifted, edging from fury to panic. You think you're so powerful, you're just one woman. I built my empire with my own hands. You won't take it from me. That ember of rage inside me flared. You didn't just build it, Xander. You built it on my sacrifices. While you were out chasing deals and women, I held everything else together. And now, thanks to the contract you signed, half of that empire belongs to me. That's not me taking it. That's you handing it over when you broke your vows. For a long moment, the line went silent again. Then he muttered, his voice breaking, You're going to regret this. I almost smiled. No, Xander. The only regret here is yours. You underestimated me. You underestimated the law. And now you're out of moves. He hung up abruptly, his threats evaporating into the dial tone. I stood there on the courthouse steps, the autumn wind brushing against my face, and I realized something profound. The balance of power had shifted. For years I had been the one on edge, walking on eggshells to keep him satisfied. Now, he was the one cornered, flailing, blaming me for a downfall of his own making. That night I sat at my desk and reviewed my evidence again. The photos, the messages, the prenup. Every piece was a nail in the coffin of his arrogance. I no longer felt sorrow for what we had lost. Instead, I felt resolve. This was no longer just about protecting myself. It was about showing him, and anyone like him, that betrayal has a cost. And if you think his panic would soften him, if you think he might show humility, you'd be wrong. Because just when I thought he couldn't sink lower, Xander found a new way to surprise me, and trust me, you'll want to hear what happened next. The next time Xander called, the venom in his voice was gone. In its place was something I had never expected from him: fear. His tone cracked as though the weight of his empire was finally pressing down on him. "Amelia," he said, his voice uneven, "you don't understand what you're doing. This company, it's my life. You can't just take half of it. You'll destroy me." I closed my eyes, steadying myself. A part of me almost felt pity, but that pity evaporated as quickly as it surfaced. I remembered his words, the ones that had cut me to pieces only weeks ago. "You're not enough. You never were." Those words hardened me now. "You destroyed yourself, Xander," I replied coldly. "When you chose betrayal over loyalty, arrogance over respect. Half the company isn't a punishment. It's what you signed your name to when you thought you'd never get caught." He groaned, frustration boiling in his tone. "Fine, I messed up, but this is too much. You could walk away with money, with comfort. Why do you need to ruin me?" I leaned back in my chair, my voice steady but sharp. "Because for years you dismissed me as nothing. You made me feel invisible. You forgot that I was standing beside you while you built that empire. You forgot that I had my own power. This isn't about revenge, Xander. It's about justice." On the other end of the line, I heard him inhale shakily. And then, unbelievably, his voice broke into something I never thought I'd hear: tears. "Please," he whispered, almost choking on the word. "Amelia, don't do this. I can't lose everything. You can take the house, the cars, anything you want, but not the business. It's all I have left." For a brief second, my heart wavered. Hearing him cry was surreal, almost disorienting. This was the man who once strutted through boardrooms, who mocked me for being just a lawyer. Now he was begging like a child who had lost his toy. But then clarity struck. His tears weren't for me. They weren't for our marriage, or for the decade we spent together. They were for himself, for the empire he feared losing. His desperation wasn't love, it was greed. "Do you remember the clause, Xander?" I asked softly, almost gently. "You're the one who demanded it. You wanted protection. And now it's the very thing undoing you. That's not my fault. That's yours." He sobbed once, then quickly tried to mask it with anger. "You'll regret this, Amelia. If you push me too far, I'll find someone, anyone who will take me on. I'll drag this through court until you're drained." I almost laughed. "Go ahead. But be honest with your next lawyer. Tell them about the affair. Tell them about the prenup. Otherwise, they'll walk out too. And when they do, you'll realize something you still refuse to see. Your downfall isn't my doing. It's yours." There was silence again, heavy and suffocating. Finally, he muttered, "You're cruel." "No," I corrected, my voice firm. "I'm fair. And fairness is something you never gave me in this marriage." I hung up before he could respond, my hands trembling, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of standing my ground. For years I had swallowed his insults, his dismissals, his endless need to make me feel small. But now, for the first time, I wasn't shrinking. I was towering over him, not because I wanted to, but because he had forced me into this role. That night, as I sat by the window, the city lights glowing in the distance, I reflected on how quickly roles can reverse. The man who once called me weak was now unraveling, and the woman he underestimated was holding all the cards. But if you think Xander's tears meant he was ready to surrender, you'd be mistaken. What came next was even more shocking, because desperation makes people reckless, and his next move would prove just how far he was willing to go. The knock on my door came early one morning, just as the sun was rising. I wasn't expecting anyone, and when I opened it, my heart skipped. There he was, Xander. But gone was the polished man in tailored suits and expensive cologne. He looked haggard, his hair disheveled, his shirt wrinkled. For the first time in years, I barely recognized him. "Amelia," he said quietly, his voice raw, "please, can we talk?" Every instinct in me screamed to slam the door, but curiosity held me still. I stepped aside reluctantly, and he entered. His shoulders were hunched, his arrogance stripped away. He sat at my kitchen table like a man who had lost everything. "I know I hurt you," he began, his eyes glassy. I made mistakes. But I've ended things with her. The affair is over. I realized she was never right for me. You and I, we had something real. Maybe we can fix it. Start over. His words landed with the weight of irony. This was the man who once laughed in my face, declaring I wasn't worthy of him. The man who boasted about his mistress as though she was a prize. Now he was trying to convince me to rebuild what he had burned to ashes. I crossed my arms. You ended things with her because she left you, didn't she? His eyes darted away and I had my answer. The rumors I had heard were true. His mistress had lost interest the moment she realized his wealth was slipping away. She wanted luxury, not a man drowning in legal battles. Amelia, that doesn't matter, he protested weakly. What matters is us. We can get through this. I know we can. I'll do whatever it takes. The audacity almost made me laugh. Do you think I've forgotten what you said to me? How you called me dull, plain, unworthy? How you stood in this very house and told me you wanted to marry her because she was better than me? He flinched, his hands gripping the edge of the table. I was wrong. I was stupid. I didn't know what I had until it was gone. Please, Amelia, we were happy once. We can be again. Just don't take the business. It's all I have left. And there it was, the truth behind his desperation. This wasn't about love. It wasn't about regret. It was about the empire he was terrified of losing. His tears weren't for me, they were for himself. I leaned closer, my voice steady and unyielding. You don't want me back, Xander. You want your business. You want me to give up my rights so you can crawl back to the life you destroyed. But I'm not that woman anymore. I won't sacrifice myself so you can keep playing king. His face crumpled. Amelia, please, he whispered. Don't do this. Don't make me lose everything. I'll change. I'll be better. The sound of his pleading might have once broken me, but now it only reminded me of every night I cried myself to sleep while he stayed out working. Every insult, every time he compared me to other women, every moment he made me feel invisible. His begging was nothing compared to the years he stole from me. You should have thought about that before you betrayed me, I said firmly. Before you tore down our marriage with your arrogance. I gave you loyalty, devotion, and love. You gave me contempt, and now you want mercy. You will find none here. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking, but I didn't waver. I had cried enough tears for both of us. Now it was his turn to drown in them. I stood signaling the conversation was over. This marriage is finished. You will sign over what's mine, and you will live with the consequences of the choices you made. That's the only future left for us. He looked up at me with red, desperate eyes, but I didn't flinch. For the first time, I saw him for what he truly was. Not a partner, not a husband, but a man stripped of his illusions, exposed for the coward he had always been. As I closed the door behind him, a calm settled over me. He could beg, he could cry, he could promise the world, but it no longer mattered. Because I wasn't fighting for us anymore. I was fighting for me. I will never forget the silence that filled the room after Xander left my kitchen that morning. The echo of his pleas still hung in the air, but instead of weakening me, they solidified my resolve. That moment was my liberation. I had finally seen through every layer of his desperation, every mask he wore to manipulate me. He didn't want me back. He wanted control. And for the first time, I realized I was free to walk away, unchained. I sat at the table where he had begged for mercy, my coffee growing cold beside untouched legal documents. I thought back over the years our wedding day, when he held my hands and promised forever. The countless nights I worked late building my career while keeping our home afloat. The sacrifices I made believing in a partnership that was never equal. It hit me like a tidal wave. I had been loyal to a lie. And now standing at the threshold of freedom, I knew I couldn't waste this chance. This wasn't just about ending a marriage. It was about reclaiming the years I had lost. About proving to myself that his cruelty didn't define me. The more I reflected, the clearer it became. Xander's so-called remorse wasn't born of love. It was fear. Fear of losing his business. Fear of being exposed. Fear of watching the empire he flaunted crumble into dust. His tears were not for me, they were for his pride. and I would not confuse his desperation with redemption. That afternoon, I called a colleague from my firm. Though I was a lawyer myself, I knew better than to represent my own case. I needed distance clarity and a trusted ally who could fight on my behalf. Within hours, the wheels were in motion. My colleague agreed to take the case, and together, we reviewed every piece of evidence, the prenup, the photos, the messages, the financial records. With every page, we turned the walls closed tighter around Xander. By the end of the meeting, my colleague looked at me and said, "He has no escape. You're walking into this with ironclad proof. He'll try to fight, but in court he's already lost." Those words fueled me. For weeks, Xander had tried to convince me I was powerless. Now I held all the power, and I intended to use it wisely. But make no mistake, this wasn't about revenge. Revenge is fleeting. This was about justice, about balance, about ensuring that the man who belittled me, betrayed me, and tried to discard me like trash would finally face the consequences of his arrogance. I wrote in my journal that night, "This is my turning point. I will not let pain define me. I will use it to rebuild myself stronger than ever." Of course, I knew Xander wouldn't surrender easily. Men like him rarely do. His pride was too great, his ego too fragile. He would thrash against the inevitable, clinging to the illusion that he could still win. And I was ready for that. In fact, I welcomed it. Because the longer he resisted, the more the world would see the truth that behind his wealth and charm was a man drowning in his own lies. And here is where I'll let you in on something. If you think his begging was the lowest he could go, you're mistaken. The real twist, the one that shattered his illusion of power forever, was just around the corner. Stay with me, because what happened next will make you question how far desperation can push a man. The day of reckoning came faster than either of us expected. Xander had run out of lawyers, run out of excuses, and run out of time. My colleague filed the necessary motions, and the prenup loomed over him like a guillotine. There was no way around it. Every clause, every word, every signature pointed to one conclusion. If he cheated, I was entitled to half of his business, and I had the proof. We met in a sterile conference room at my firm. The blinds were drawn, the air conditioner humming above us. Xander sat across from me, looking like a shadow of the man he used to be. His once impeccable suit was wrinkled, his tie loose, his eyes bloodshot. The arrogance he wore like armor was gone, replaced by resignation. My attorney laid the documents in front of him. "Mr. Hale," she said firmly, "you have two choices. You can take this to court, where your affair will become public record, and the prenup will guarantee your loss. Or you can settle here today, sign over half the business, and avoid further humiliation." Xander's hands trembled as he picked up the pen. He looked at me across the table, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're really going to do this, Amelia? After everything we had?" I held his gaze unflinching. "You already did this, Xander, the moment you betrayed me. I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply claiming what is rightfully mine." He opened his mouth as if to argue, then closed it again. Deep down, he knew there was no escape. With a shaky breath, he signed. The sound of the pen scratching across the paper was like a door slamming shut on the life we once shared. As I watched him hand the documents back, a flood of emotions washed over me. Relief, triumph, and yes, sorrow. Not sorrow for losing him, but sorrow for the years I wasted believing in a man who never deserved me. Xander leaned back in his chair, defeated. "You'll never be happy, Amelia. You think this makes you strong, but you'll regret it." I stood gathering the documents with steady hands. "No, Xander. I won't regret reclaiming my dignity. I won't regret holding you accountable. And I certainly won't regret freeing myself from a marriage built on lies." He didn't reply. His silence was louder than any insult he could have thrown at me. Walking out of that conference room, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in years, I could breathe without the stench of his arrogance suffocating me. Half the company was now mine, not because I begged for it, but because justice demanded it. But here's the truth I want to share with you. The victory wasn't in the money or the business. The real victory was in rediscovering my strength. For too long, I believed his lies about me being less than not enough. That day proved what I should have known all along. My worth was never tied to his validation. And let me pause here to speak directly to you. If you've ever been underestimated, if someone has tried to strip you of your worth, know this: you are stronger than they want you to believe. Don't let their arrogance define you. If my story resonates with you, take a moment to subscribe and share it. Leave a comment about your own fight for dignity. Your voice matters, and together we remind the world that no one gets to silence us. Back in that conference room, Xander looked like a man watching his empire crumble, and in many ways he was. But for me, it was the beginning of something new, something powerful, something free. Because the truth is, when you've been broken and find the courage to rebuild, there's nothing left to fear. Xander once lived like a king. He flaunted his mansion at every party, parked his luxury cars in front of five-star restaurants, and wore tailored suits that screamed success. But once the settlement was signed and half his business slipped into my hands, his kingdom began to crumble piece by piece. At first he tried to keep up appearances. He still drove the sports car, still ordered the expensive bottles of wine. But it didn't last. His business earnings were cut in half, and his lifestyle was too inflated to sustain. Within weeks, creditors began circling. The mortgage on the mansion became impossible to manage. The payments on the cars piled up. One by one, his symbols of power disappeared. The mansion was the first to go. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that he cried the day he handed over the keys. He had loved that house because it was his throne, the proof that he had made it. Now stripped of the marble floors and the sprawling lawn, he was forced to rent a modest condo. No sprawling driveway, no staff, no lavish dinner parties, just four walls and silence. And the mistress, she vanished quicker than the champagne at one of his parties. The moment she realized Xander wasn't the golden ticket she imagined, she cut ties. His texts went unanswered, his calls ignored. Rumor had it, she was already on the arm of another man, this time one with deeper pockets. That was the cruelest twist for him. He had traded a wife who stood by him through thick and thin for a woman who was only there for the glitter. And when the glitter faded, so did she. I won't pretend I didn't feel satisfaction hearing about his downfall. I did. But it wasn't petty joy, it was the sense that balance had finally been restored. For years he strutted through life untouchable, convinced his money and charm made him invincible. Now he was facing the truth, without integrity, without loyalty. Even the richest man can lose everything. The last time I saw him in public, he was sitting alone at a cafe. His once perfect hair was thinning his shirt, rumpled, his eyes vacant. He didn't see me walk past, and I didn't stop. I didn't need to. That image told me everything I needed to know. He was no longer the man who belittled me, mocked me, or flaunted his mistress. He was just another man brought down by his own hubris. Meanwhile, whispers spread through our old social circle. People who once envied him now pitied him. "Did you hear what happened to Xander?" they whispered. Lost half his business, lost the house, lost the girl. His name, once spoken with admiration, became a cautionary tale. And though he tried once or twice to call me again, I never answered. I had nothing left to say. He had chosen his path, and now he was walking it alone. For me, the most powerful part of watching his downfall wasn't the money or the business. It was the poetic justice. The man who told me I was not enough was now the one, abandoned, stripped of status, living in a condo he once would have sneered at. The man who once mocked my career as small was now overshadowed by the very lawyer he had dismissed. Life has a way of balancing the scales. And in Xander's case, the scales didn't just balance, they crashed down hard. But my story doesn't end with his fall. Because while he was sinking, I was rising. And what I built in the aftermath was not just wealth, it was freedom, dignity, and a life finally on my terms. Stay with me because the ending is not about him. It's about me reclaiming everything he tried to take away. The day I walked into my new home, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: peace. The house wasn't just bigger or more luxurious than the one I shared with Xander. It was mine. Every wall, every window, every corner symbolized freedom. For once, I didn't feel like a guest in my own life. I felt like the author of it. Managing my share of his company turned out to be easier than I expected. I wasn't interested in sitting in his old office or micromanaging staff. Instead, I appointed a capable manager, someone who respected me and understood the vision I had. The dividends rolled in steadily, combining with my income as a lawyer. For the first time, I had financial power equal to the emotional power I had discovered within myself. But the real transformation wasn't material, it was internal. I no longer woke up anxious about what insult or criticism Xander might throw my way. I no longer dreaded the sound of the front door opening late at night, wondering what perfume would follow him in. My mornings began with quiet coffee on the balcony watching the sunrise. My evenings ended with laughter shared with friends, not tears in an empty bed. There were whispers, of course. People from our old circle reached out curious, some even shocked, at how completely the tables had turned. They wanted to know how I had done it, how I had stood so firm when everything seemed stacked against me. I told them the truth. I simply refused to let someone else define my worth. I began giving small talks at community events, sharing my story not as gossip, but as empowerment. I wanted others, especially women who felt invisible in their relationships, to know they weren't powerless, that they had a voice, a choice, and the right to demand respect. Every time I spoke, I saw eyes light up, shoulders straighten, hope flicker where despair had once lived. That more than money was my true reward. Of course, Xander tried to reach me again. Once he even showed up at my office looking worn down, asking for another chance. But I didn't even grant him a meeting. I had learned my lesson. He didn't want me. He wanted what I represented: stability, control, his old life back. I had no interest in being his safety net ever again. Instead, I focused on building a life I actually wanted. I traveled, something I had always postponed because of his endless business trips. I reconnected with friends I had drifted from, people who reminded me of who I was before I lost myself in his shadow. I even started painting again, an old hobby he once dismissed as a waste of time. For me, every brushstroke was proof that I was reclaiming pieces of myself he had tried to erase. Looking back, I realized the irony. He thought divorcing me would set him free, but it set me free instead. He thought I would crumble, but I flourished. He believed money and beauty were the only currencies of value, but I learned that integrity, strength, and self-respect are priceless. And here's the message I want to leave with you. Never let anyone convince you that you're not enough. Never let someone's arrogance or betrayal dictate your story. If I could rise from the ashes of humiliation and betrayal, so can you. So if you've made it this far into my story, thank you. If you believe in reclaiming your dignity and building a life on your own terms, hit that subscribe button, share this story, and leave me a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your journey. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just my victory. It's a reminder to every person listening: you have more strength than you realize, and the life you deserve is waiting on the other side of courage. When the dust finally settled, I found myself standing in a garden I had planted behind my new home. It was quiet, the air filled with the scent of fresh soil and blooming flowers. For years, my life had been chaos, arguments, suspicions, endless tension. Now there was only stillness. It was in that quiet I realized the greatest victory wasn't the business, the house, or even the financial security. It was peace. I often sit with a cup of tea at sunset, watching the light fade, and I think about the woman I used to be. The woman who cried into her pillow, who believed she wasn't enough because her husband said so. She's gone. In her place is someone stronger, wiser, and freer. Someone who finally knows her worth. If there's one lesson I've carried with me through all of this, it's that betrayal doesn't have to break you. It can build you. Pain doesn't have to define you. It can refine you. And freedom doesn't come when someone else gives it to you. It comes when you claim it for yourself. To anyone listening who has felt invisible, belittled, or trapped in someone else's shadow, remember this: you are not powerless. You are not defined by their cruelty. You have the right to walk away, to start over, and to find joy again. My story isn't just about divorce, it's about rebirth. It's about proving that when one chapter ends painfully, another can begin beautifully. And as I close this chapter of my life, I do so with gratitude, not for the betrayal, but for the strength it forced me to find. Because in the end, I didn't just survive Xander's downfall, I rose from it. And that to me is the sweetest ending of all.